So no special lights or anything like that today, and this is actually easy mode for me. Because I wanted to talk about something real quick. I watched a video this morning that Matty Hapoya shared, so this is totally inspired by that, and he did a video about focal lengths because he took a bunch of vintage lenses and had them upgraded to become cinema lenses so that he could use them in a proper setting to make a movie while still having that vintage kind of vibe and, you know, character, and that's kind of what the video is about. You know, I've been thinking a lot about focal length and aperture and things like that because for me, it's fun to do that. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a spiritual journey for me to choose lenses and things like that. But when I look at the real projects that I've done, like 2 feature films, I've literally used 3 focal lengths total, and really 2 focal lengths. The first movie I shot on my phone, and that was like a 27mm lens. And I shot the entire film on my phone. So I was limited. I didn't have any, you know, choices to make. I didn't have to think about it. And I got everything that I wanted. Like I never felt in that film like I was limited in any kind of way. You know, I got the close-up shots, I got far-away shots, I got everything. I just moved according to how I had to move to get the shot. And since it was on the wide end, which is 27mm, which is close to 28, it was pretty flexible. Like I didn't really have any situations where I needed a 20 or a 16 or something like that to get further back. Like I think maybe the biggest limitation you'll have with, you know, needing a wide angle lens is maybe you're in an enclosed space like an elevator or a car or something like that, and you don't have enough physical room to move back to get in focus, you know, and to get enough of the scene for it to not just be somebody's face or just eyes if that's not what you're going for. I never felt like that in the film, but probably I never felt like that because I knew what I had, and so it didn't even become a possibility for me to get a shot like that because I didn't have that opportunity. But with a 27, I pretty much had the opportunity to do anything I wanted to do. The second film, I used a 28 and a 50. And, you know, I started to think more intentionally about blurred background, depth of field, things like that. And when I felt like I needed that, I went to the 50. When I thought about it and I thought, you know, like I don't want the audience to feel like they're like close to the character right now, I went with the 50. I shot further back and I got that compression where everything felt like it was, you know, closer to me from behind. I didn't care if I got the entire environment in the shot because I would say for 80% of the film, I used the 28 because the 28 covered everything. And the cool thing about 28 on the wide end is that if you get close to the camera, you don't get as much distortion as if you're using a 20 or even a 24, like your nose doesn't get bigger, your face doesn't get distorted as much. I mean, any lens is going to distort if you get really right up to the lens. Right now, I'm about 5 feet from this lens, and I'm not going to tell you what it is or what focal length it is until I'm done. But, you know, I think that it's interesting that, you know, you can have a 16, a 24, a 28, a 35, a 50, an 85, a 105. You can have this plethora of choices, and then you start thinking about what focal length is best for this shot to best tell this story. And it's like, sometimes that could be paralyzing because at the end of the day, I don't think it really makes a difference. I think that it's more about style or vibe. You know what I mean? Like, what does the lens look like? And like Matty Hapoya said in his video, and I say this all the time, what do you want it to feel like? You know, what do you want this experience to feel like to the people watching this film? Because a 28 is going to feel different than a 50. A 20 is going to feel different than a 105 or an 85. It's just going to have a whole different kind of experience. And you can't really define that experience with words. It just feels different. It looks different. I mean, yeah, there's, you know, I know people argue about compression and bokeh and stuff like that all the time, but there's definitely a difference when you're shooting with a longer focal length where the background feels closer to you and there's less of it. as opposed to when you're using a wider lens, like a 35 is kind of right on the cusp, but then 28, 24, 20, 16, 12, 10, whatever, then you're including everything. Even if you get up close, you're including a lot of what's going on. And so, you know, the only thing I disagree with what Maddie was talking about was, like, he said that when you're using a wide angle lens, it feels like uncomfortably close sometimes, like you're right there, you're in the same room. And honestly, if you're shooting like two people having a conversation and you want the audience to feel like they're in the middle of that conversation, personally, I don't really see a difference between using a 24 or a 20 and a 50 in terms of feeling like you're right there, or, you know, feeling like you're far away and watching them, like, you know, from a distance. Like, I don't really see that. I think it really depends on how you fill the frame. But, you know, when you fill the frame, you are going to get either less of the background or more of the background. You are going to get, you know, like, people's faces are going to look thinner. If you're using a wider lens, they're going to look fuller and more probably like just different, you know. Like, I don't want to say which is more like real life. Like, some people say you see the world from 35 to 50 or 28 to 50. You know, who's to say? You know, you got to like crawl into somebody else's body and put their eyes on your body. Like, you can't really do that. It's really about vibe and feeling, you know. It's more about, you know, I think it's a good idea when you're starting to use a bunch of different focal lengths. That's why I feel like it's a really good idea to start with a kit lens, which is generally a zoom lens, so that you have the opportunity to check out all these different focal lengths. You know, the only limiting factor with a kit lens is that usually the kit lens is not going to offer you the apertures that you really need to experiment. You know, like, it's better to have a set aperture from, say, you know, 24 to 70. If you could keep it at 2.8, then you can really compare which focal lengths you like. If you know, as you get longer in a zoom lens, if the aperture just steps down and, you know, you can always see the background and you can't really blur it out the way you want to, unless you get really close to the lens. But if you're 5 feet away or 10 feet away, everything's going to be in focus. You're really just testing if you can get the same shot with different focal lengths. But if you really want to test the vibe, the feeling, how it feels different, you want to shoot with different focal lengths with the same aperture. And then you'll see not only how much of the background you can include, but how much you can kind of obscure and blur out and make it look different. And even trying to get the same shots, but if you have the same aperture, you have a better chance of really getting the same shot if it's a fast lens, because then you can have the same like percentage of blurriness in the background, you know, regardless of how far you are, unless you get really far away. So I don't know, you know, like I tend to think like I don't have a lot of lenses, and that's intentional. Like, I could buy a ton of cheap lenses, just, you know, like vintage lenses as a hobby. You know, you can get them for 20 bucks, 25 bucks. You could buy these lenses all the time. So I could have all these different focal lengths and go, okay, I'm covered for anything. But I think, you know, unless you're doing like a wedding or birding or sports, stuff like that, yes, you need longer lenses, definitely, to capture what you want to capture. But if you're shooting a film, if you're making a movie and you have control over how far the camera is going to be from the subject, I don't think it makes any difference at all, except for what your style is going to be. Like, how do you want it to look? How do you want it to feel? It's like playing jazz or pop music, you know, or like R&B or metal or something like that. If you're a singer-songwriter or heavily produced, it's like the words are going to be the same in the song. The story is going to be basically the same, but it's going to feel different. You know, if some punk band or some metal band is playing the same song that a singer-songwriter is playing on the guitar, if it's the exact same song with the same lyrics and the same chord changes and, you know, everything basically the same except for the style, that's how lenses are different, I think. They do look a lot different. Like, a wide-angle lens looks a lot different than a long lens, even if you I mean, when you get really, really far away, I would argue that they don't look that different. But when you're close, when you're within a reasonable range, and you're making a movie and trying to fill up the frame, then there's a big difference. And then you're talking about, you should experiment with a bunch of different focal lengths and decide what feels best to you, like what resonates with you, like what feels like, yeah, that's the way I like to communicate, that's the way I want people to receive the story that I'm trying to put forth. So I think the other thing is like aspect ratio. You know, what does a certain focal length look like inside of a certain aspect ratio? If you're shooting wide and you're shooting at 2.39 to 1 like this video, you're really taking advantage of that wide field of view. If you're just using long lenses all the time, why are you shooting 2.39 to 1? Well, although I could argue with myself that if you're shooting longer, so you're getting less in the frame, maybe shooting at 2.39 to 1 is an advantage, because then, you know, you're not just always like this, you're opening it up a little bit. So it is a lot to think about, but there are some tangible reasons to choose different focal lengths, but then there's just, you know, your aesthetic, you know, the way it looks good to you, the way it feels good to you. So yeah, that was on my mind. I wanted to share that in easy mode, no big lights or anything like that. I'm shooting 2.39 to 1, and I just want to let you know that I'm shooting at 24 millimeters right now. 24 millimeters. I'm using the 20-60 kit lens. I'm shooting at f4. I'm about 5 feet away from the camera, and I'm doing this because I wanted to see what this spherical lens looks like in a 2.39 to 1 aspect ratio, and if it feels more cinematic as opposed to when I'm using my anamorphic lenses. Now, if I was really doing this properly, I should go out to the same location I was at yesterday and shoot the exact same scene from the same distance with the same focal length or the equivalent focal length and see how that feels. And so maybe I'll do that at the end of this video. Maybe I'll get that one shot today and try to see how that feels. It's a completely different day. It's much sunnier outside, and I won't get the same mood, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if I'll do that. Otherwise, that's it. Please subscribe, like button, all the YouTube things, Patreon, buy my prints, go to my website. I'm selling all these beautiful prints. It's so cool to have them. I have, you know, all these cool prints. Like, it's really exciting to take your photography and put it on paper, and now I can actually frame these. I mean, and this paper is really high quality, and these photographs, honestly, they look like paintings with this paper. It's really a thick paper, it's archival, it'll last forever, and I think if you want to have your photographs look like paintings, spend a little extra money and use archival paper. So that's it. Have a beautiful day, and I'll catch you later on. I already said have a beautiful day, so do that twice.